The conflict began long before the fines arrived. It started with the simple, familiar rhythm of a man's daily routine, the kind that had never bothered anyone until the wrong person gained a little bit of power. The homeowner, a contractor who spent his days building and repairing the homes that other people lived comfortably in, had always seen his truck as nothing more than a tool, a reliable, hardworking, slightly weathered extension of the life he had built. The truck carried lumber, concrete tools, generators, ladders, and everything else that helped him earn his living. It was a symbol of effort and perseverance, a dependable companion parked faithfully in his driveway every night. For years, nobody cared. Neighbors walked past it without a second thought. Children rode their bikes beside it. Delivery drivers parked next to it. It was simply part of the street, as unremarkable as the trees or mailboxes lining the road. But all of that changed when a new HOA board took over, one led by people who believed that appearance mattered more than reality, and that perfection could be achieved with enough rules, fines, and threats. Among them was a woman known throughout the neighborhood as the loudest voice in any complaint, the harshest critic of any perceived flaw, and the proudest enforcer of any rule, no matter how insignificant. Her insistence on control clung to the community like a tightening vine, squeezing the joy out of homeowners one petty demand at a time. When she and the board introduced a revised list of regulations, written with meticulous attention to aesthetic uniformity, the truck suddenly became a problem. It was labeled unsightly, commercial, inappropriate for a residential driveway. They claimed it did not fit the visual harmony of the neighborhood. The homeowner remembered the morning the first fine appeared on his door, a crisp, self-important notice reminding him of his supposed violation. Although frustrated, he initially brushed it off, assuming it was a simple misunderstanding. He continued parking his truck in his driveway as he always had, believing logic would prevail. But logic wasn't part of the new HOA system. More notices followed, more fines, more warnings. They escalated slowly, like a storm building on the horizon. What irritated him most wasn't the money, though the growing stack of invoices was absurd and insulting. It was the principle, the idea that the board, and particularly the woman at its center, believed they could dictate what kind of life someone should live within the walls of their own property. The truck wasn't broken. It wasn't leaking oil. It wasn't blocking anyone's view. It simply existed, and that alone was enough to trigger the HOA hostility. In the weeks that followed, the homeowner noticed subtle changes around his community. Neighbors who once chatted freely now whispered about sudden new restrictions. A retired veteran down the street had been fined for a flagpole that had stood for nearly a decade. A family around the corner received a notice demanding the repainting of their door because the shade of blue had too much saturation. Pets were suddenly under tighter watch, lawns were scrutinized with unforgiving precision, and mailboxes were judged on whether their paint reflected enough uniformity. It became clear that the HOA had shifted from a group form to maintain property standards to something more aggressive, something fueled by power, authority, and personal vendettas. And nothing represented their newfound obsession more clearly than their fixation on the contractor's truck. As fines piled up, the homeowner's patience thinned. He made reasonable attempts to resolve the issue, but every effort was met with cold resistance. The board insisted that the truck violated the new bylaws and that non-compliance would escalate to legal action. They did not want conversation. They wanted submission. They wanted the truck gone. The turning point came the morning he found not one, but 3 separate violation notices taped to his door. The papers fluttered slightly in the breeze, like a mocking trio of warnings meant to break his resolve. Adios. The bold letters threatened further fines, potential towing, and additional penalties if he did not remove the commercial vehicle from sight immediately. For the first time, real anger began to simmer beneath his frustration. He realized the board was no longer enforcing rules. They were waging a campaign. That day, he drove a longer route to work, thinking deeply about the situation. He considered the broader pattern of control sweeping across the neighborhood. He thought about the stories from neighbors who had been similarly targeted. He reflected on how the simplest aspects of their lives were being policed by people who believed they were superior because they sat behind a table at monthly meetings. Then, somewhere along that drive, an idea formed, one that started small but expanded rapidly, fueled by indignation and creativity. A plan that would not only challenge the HOA authority, but expose its ridiculousness to the entire community. A plan that would make them confront something far bigger than a truck in a driveway. The more he considered it, the more he realized it was exactly what the situation required, a bold, unavoidable demonstration that would hit the HOA where it hurt the most, their obsession with appearances. By the time he returned home that evening, his mind was settled. The truck would not be hidden. It would not be moved away. If the HOA wanted to make it the center of their attention, he would make sure the entire neighborhood had the best view possible. They wanted to control his parking spot. Fine, you would find one they had absolutely no authority to regulate. The next several days were spent quietly preparing. He gathered information, researched community rules, examined public spaces within the neighborhood, and took note of where the HOA influence ended. What he discovered was enlightening. The entrance of the neighborhood, the very spot where new visitors formed their first impression, was not maintained by the HOA at all. It was public property left under, but now their overreach was exposed. The truck became the symbol of resistance the neighborhood didn't know it needed. As the sun continued its arc across the sky, more people stopped to take pictures. Some residents subtly nodded in the homeowner's direction when they saw him nearby, silent acknowledgments of appreciation or solidarity. Even those who had supported the HOA or tried to remain uninvolved could not pretend to ignore the spectacle. The board members, on the other hand, began circling the area repeatedly, inspecting the space like inspectors searching for contraband. Their frustration only grew as they realized that no matter how long they searched, they would not find a rule that gave them authority over the truck's new location. They were trapped by their own limitations, and the homeowner watched them with a quiet satisfaction. As the day ended, he knew this was only the beginning. The HOA would not let this go. They would escalate, they would push back, and they would try every tactic available to reclaim their sense of control. But now the momentum had shifted. The community had seen the board rattled, frustrated, and powerless. The message was loud, it was visible, and it was only the first step of a much larger plan. The homeowner's revenge had only begun to unfold, and the HOA meltdown was just getting started. And as he lay down that night, he already knew what Phase 2 would look like. The next morning arrived not with peace, but with a tension that rippled through the neighborhood like heat rising off asphalt, subtle yet unmistakable. Word had spread overnight, and by sunrise, the truck positioned boldly at the entrance had become the unspoken headline of the entire community. Residents driving out for work slowed as they passed, observing the truck with amused curiosity or quiet approval. Some even parked their cars briefly nearby just to get a closer look, absorbing the unexpected defiance that had shaken the once confident control of the AO. Meanwhile, in the board members' minds, the situation had transcended mere irritation. It had become an emergency. Although the homeowner was not physically present at the entrance, he watched the unfolding chaos from a distance, keeping himself partially out of sight as he monitored their reactions. It didn't take long before a small cluster of HOA board members emerged, drawn to the scene as though pulled by an invisible rope. Their posture carried a strange blend of authority and desperation, a posture that revealed the cracks forming in their sense of power. They inspected the truck from every angle, stepping around it with exaggerated motions, searching for any scrap of justification they could use to intervene. Their expressions betrayed them. Confusion, irritation, suspicion, and most telling of all, helplessness. They were so accustomed to absolute control within the neighborhood that encountering something beyond their reach seemed to scramble their instincts. It was as though the truck's presence at the entrance had disrupted their internal hierarchy, stripping away their usual confidence. Some residents approached to watch, standing at polite distances but clearly invested in the spectacle. The longer the HOA members lingered at the entrance, the more obvious it became that they were struggling. The president of the board arrived a short while later, stepping out of her SUV with stiff determination. Her arrival intensified the uneasy energy in the morning air. Even from afar, the homeowner could sense her agitation. Her movements were sharp, her inspection methodical, her frustration palpable. She circled the vehicle again and again like a hawk searching for prey that refused to appear. The unwritten expectation among board members was clear. She needed to regain control, restore authority, and put an end to this growing act of rebellion. But she found nothing of use. No rule to quote, no violation to reference, no power to wield. The truck was untouchable, and with every passing minute, the power the board once held began slipping further from their grasp. The neighborhood residents, long used to the board's heavy-handed oversight, watched the spectacle unfold with a mixture of fascination and relief. It was as if they were witnessing the first crack in the fortress that had dominated their everyday lives. Some nodded subtly at the truck as they passed, acknowledging the significance of the moment. Others lingered at the end of their driveways, chatting and gesturing toward the entrance, sharing quiet amusement over the board's predicament. The shift in atmosphere was unmistakable. The HOA, once feared, was now being openly questioned without a single word spoken. As the day progressed, the homeowner observed how quickly the narrative shifted from private frustration to public spectacle. Neighbors who rarely spoke began exchanging knowing looks. Cars slowed more deliberately as drivers took longer glances at the truck. Even the school buses hesitated slightly when turning into the neighborhood, their drivers seemingly taking mental notes of the strange standoff. The board members eventually huddled together at the entrance, their gestures animated and their tones urgent, though the homeowner was too far to hear their exact words. Still, their desperation was unmistakable. They were arguing among themselves, gesturing toward the truck, pointing at documents, and checking their phones as if searching for guidance or rules that didn't exist. The sight of them scrambling for authority that was slipping through their fingers gave the homeowner a deeper sense of satisfaction than he had anticipated. It wasn't pettiness he felt, at least not entirely. It was clarity. The HOA had thrived on intimidation, using threats and fines as tools to shape the community according to their own narrow standards. But now, exposed in the open with no rule to hide behind, their influence seemed flimsy, superficial, even fragile, and the residents were noticing. By afternoon, the tension evolving from the board's inability to act became almost comical. The HOA president returned multiple times throughout the day, each visit marked by increasingly frantic attempts to solve the problem. She made calls, paced, gestured at the entrance, and even tried to estimate whether the truck was partially on HOA property. It wasn't. The homeowner had measured everything precisely. The truck sat comfortably within the public zone, unmovable in its defiance. The community's attention only grew. Parents walking their children home from school stopped to stare at the truck and the flustered board members nearby. Joggers paused their routines to take mental inventory of the mounting HOA meltdown. Teenagers rode their bikes past the entrance repeatedly, enjoying the unexpected entertainment. The truck had become a fixture, a landmark, and perhaps even a symbol of something much larger than one man's parking disputes. And as the day wound down, the HOA board retreated temporarily, likely to convene an emergency meeting about the growing crisis. Their retreat only solidified the sense that their authority was beginning to falter. The homeowner understood the significance of this shift. He knew the board would not accept defeat easily. Their egos were too deeply tied to the control they believed they possessed. The truck's placement, harmless yet undeniably bold, was a blow to their pride, and pride often fueled the worst decisions. The homeowner sensed that their next moves would be aggressive, even desperate. But he was prepared. He had anticipated their escalation. By planting the truck where it could not be regulated, he had forced them into a corner, exposing their weaknesses while empowering the community around him to question the authority they once submitted to. That night, as he watched the truck illuminated by the soft glow of the entrance lights, he felt a quiet certainty settle over him. This wasn't a temporary stunt, this was a turning point. The HOA, rattled and scrambling, would soon make mistakes he could use against them. And as he went to sleep, he knew everything was about to escalate even further, pushing the board toward a breaking point they would struggle to recover from. The following morning arrived with a heaviness that hinted at trouble long before the homeowner even stepped outside. The air felt charged, as though the neighborhood had entered a new phase of tension, one fueled not just by curiosity, but by the HOA rising desperation. After spending the previous day scrambling to regain their authority, the board had now moved into retaliation mode, driven less by rules and more by wounded pride. The homeowner sensed it before he confirmed it. Even from inside his house, he noticed the distinct shift in atmosphere, the way cars moved a little slower, the way neighbors exchanged cautious glances, the way an almost electric anticipation clung to the early morning light. When he walked outside, he immediately saw evidence of the HOA counterattack. A fresh stack of violation notices taped aggressively to his front door, edges fluttering in the breeze as though announcing themselves to the entire street. They were the largest stack he had ever received at once, an unmistakable sign that the board had spent their evening crafting every penalty they could legally, or questionably, justify. Though he had expected them to escalate, the sheer volume of notices revealed something deeper. The board was no longer enforcing rules, they were retaliating. Each notice targeted a different aspect of his property. The grass was suddenly deemed slightly uneven. His porch light was too bright for community standards. The paint on his shutters was aging beyond acceptable appearance. The mailbox was faded. The trash bins were visible from certain angles. These were not real violations. They were retaliatory attacks disguised as regulation. They were also transparent. The board wanted to overwhelm him, to pressure him, to force him back into compliance through sheer exhaustion. But instead of discouraging him, the notices only solidified his resolve. The homeowner knew exactly what the HOA was doing. They were retaliating because they felt powerless at the entrance, and rather than accept their limitations, they had turned their energy toward regaining control the only way they knew how. And yet, despite their aggressive tactics, the community's reaction to the truck had created an unexpected ripple effect, one the board had not anticipated. Throughout the morning, residents stopped by his yard one by one, each pretending to walk their dog or inspect their mail, but lingering long enough to make it clear they were checking on him. The shift was subtle but powerful. People who had once remained silent under the HOA gaze were now emboldened, quietly showing support through nods, glances, or the shared understanding that the board had gone too far. Some even passed by to observe the fresh stack of notices on his door, shaking their heads at the obvious pettiness. Their reactions did not go unnoticed by the HOA president, who drove past his house several times, her posture visibly rigid, her expression sharp with irritation. She seemed to be assessing the growing solidarity, recognizing the danger of losing the community's blind obedience. Her authority depended on their submission, and seeing them show even the slightest sympathy toward the homeowner sent ripples of frustration through her carefully maintained control. She needed to regain the upper hand, and the homeowner could feel her determination gathering like a storm. Late that morning, she called an emergency meeting at the community clubhouse, summoning board members and select residents under the guise of discussing urgent neighborhood concerns. The homeowner knew exactly what the meeting was really about. Him, the truck, and the shift in power the board could sense slipping away. He did not attend the meeting, not because he was uninterested, but because he already knew what it would accomplish: nothing. Instead, he watched from a distance as residents filed in, some reluctantly, others with simmering curiosity about what would be said. Inside, tensions rose. The board tried to present the truck as a threat to community order, insisting that it undermined property values and disrupted visual harmony. But their arguments, once received with fear or silent acceptance, now faced a skeptical audience. The truck wasn't on HOA property. The conflict wasn't harming anyone, and the excessive fines being thrown at the homeowner were becoming too obvious to ignore. Even those who normally supported the HO found themselves uneasy with the board's aggressive escalation. The president, sensing resistance, doubled down, framing the homeowner as a troublemaker threatening the integrity of the neighborhood. But the more desperately she spoke, the more apparent it became that the issue wasn't about a truck at all. It was about her losing control. Outside the clubhouse, the homeowner watched residents leave in small groups, whispering among themselves. Their expressions weren't angry. They were thoughtful, contemplative, and in many cases, subtly amused by how dramatically the board had reacted to a single parked truck. And then something happened that shifted the power even further. A rumor began circulating among the residents that the HOA was considering towing the truck, even though they had no legal jurisdiction over the location. The rumor spread quickly, igniting a wave of concern that the board was willing to cross legal boundaries to reassert control. The homeowner didn't need to confirm the rumor to know it was possible. Ha ha. He knew the president's pride had been wounded deeply enough that she might push the board into dangerous territory, acting impulsively rather than rationally. That afternoon, a city employee arrived at the neighborhood entrance to inspect the area, evidently responding to a complaint. The HOA president followed closely behind, gesturing with visible frustration as she attempted to convince the employee to take action. But the worker's inspection was brief, and his response was clear. The truck was parked legally, and the city had no issue with its presence. The HOA president's frustration visibly intensified, her posture stiffening as she realized she had once again hit a wall. The homeowner observed all of this quietly, recognizing that the board was nearing a breaking point. Their authority, once unquestioned, was slipping with every failed attempt to control the situation. And with every failure, the community gained more courage, more understanding, and more willingness to question the rules they had been living under. That evening, as the sun dipped behind the houses and cast long shadows across the street, the homeowner reviewed the pile of violation notices once more. They were flimsy tools of intimidation, empty threats meant to scare him back into submission. Instead, they only fueled his determination. The board had made their move. Now it was his turn. If they wanted to escalate, he would show them exactly what escalation looked like. And as night fell, he quietly began preparing for Phase 3, an action that would challenge the HOA at its core and change the neighborhood dynamic forever. For 3 peaceful days, the neighborhood felt quiet. Too quiet after the HOA meeting where Karen was voted out and practically dragged off the stage by her own tantrum. People expected her to disappear for a while, lick her wounds, rethink her life choices, maybe even read a self-help book or two, but Karen wasn't the type to retreat. She was the type to reload, and on day 4 she struck back, the warning signs. I was sipping my coffee on the porch when my phone buzzed. Bro, heads up, Karen is gathering people on Elm Street. Looks like trouble. I sighed. Of course she is, I muttered. Within an hour, a small crowd had formed across the street. Neighbors, unfamiliar faces, and in the middle of them, like some budget version of a cult leader, stood Karen, holding papers. Lots of papers. I immediately recognized the gleam in her eyes. She saw me watching and smirked like a villain in a low-budget soap opera. Afternoon, rumors started floating around. Shay's starting a petition to reverse the vote. She says the election was illegal. Ushi claims you bribed people with cookies. I didn't even bake cookies. But when I saw her version of the petition, I understood her new strategy. It wasn't just about getting her position back. It was about turning the entire neighborhood against me. I forged signatures in the HOA election. I violated safety laws. With my business, I posed a security threat to the community, and the best one. I was emotionally manipulating board members. I laughed out loud at that one. Then I saw the signatures, dozens of names. People I knew. People I talked to every week. But something was off. The signatures were identical. The handwriting was the same. She hadn't even tried to disguise it. Karen had forged the entire thing. The door-to-door campaign. I stepped outside just in time to see Karen marching toward my house with her little fan club. A poorly made banner fluttered behind her. Restore order to our community. You'd think we were overthrowing a dictator, not replacing a nosy HOA president. She didn't knock. She banged on the door like the police. I opened it calmly. Can I help you? I can resign, she snapped. The community has spoken. Looks like you spoke, I said, glancing at the forged petition. She shoved the stack of papers toward me. A sign here acknowledging your misconduct, and we'll consider letting you stay in the community. I stared at her blankly. Karen, this isn't a monarchy. I was running perfectly fine until you came along. She screeched. Stopped behind her. People shifted awkwardly. A few neighbors avoided eye contact. Most of them clearly had no idea what was going on. They had just been dragged along by her dramatic recruitment speech. You're disrupting peace, she added, stepping closer. And if you don't voluntarily step down, I have no choice but to take legal action. Oh, legal? I raised a brow. You mean the same legal system that jailed your cousin for mailbox theft? She froze. The crowd murmured. Her cousin was indeed arrested 2 years ago for stealing Amazon packages. That has nothing to do with this, she yelled. But your forged signatures do, I said. Her eyes widened, just a flicker of panic. Then she turned sharply. This isn't over, she barked, storming off. I knew it wasn't the anonymous complaint that night. I got an email. It was from the county doc. Karen had filed an official complaint against my business. She claimed I was running an unlicensed operation, endangering the community, causing a constant noise, disturbances, hosting illegal gatherings. It was my birthday barbecue. My heartbeat quickened, but not from fear. This was expected. Karen didn't give up. She escalated. I called the inspector's office first thing in the morning. To my surprise, the man laughed. Oh, her again, he said. A third complaint this month. Don't worry, we'll schedule an inspection, but we're familiar with her. Relief washed over me. I have all my documents ready for you. He nodded, scanning the room. Then his radio crackled and he sighed as he turned it down. Let me guess, I said, raising an eyebrow. More complaints from the same person? You'd think she was running her own investigation department. He muttered. But don't worry, we treat all cases the same. He didn't sound particularly enthusiastic about that part, but I appreciated the professionalism. I led him to my workspace. Clean, organized, everything labeled. He inspected the equipment, checked the ventilation, measured the space, took notes, and asked a few standard questions. Everything was going smoothly, almost too smoothly. Then we heard the screech of tires outside. I looked at the inspector. He looked at me. We both knew Karen. She marched up the driveway like she owned the place, holding a binder so thick it looked like she was carrying the lost archives of Atlantis. The inspector sighed deeply, the exhausted sigh of a man who already regretted his life choices. Karen didn't bother knocking. She barged in. I'm here to supervise, she announced. This inspection concerns the entire community. Ma'am, the inspector said calmly, well, you are not part of this inspection. I am the HOA president. A former, I corrected. She shot me a death glare. And the community's safety is my responsibility. The inspector stepped in front of her. Ma'am, I'm going to have to ask you to leave. You cannot interfere. She didn't move. She crossed her arms and planted her feet like a toddler refusing to leave a toy aisle. This inspection is happening because of me. I have evidence. I have documentation. I have photographic proof of numerous violations. The inspector frowned. The complaint mentioned noise, unlicensed activity, and unsafe conditions. That's what I'm here to investigate. Karen said triumphantly as she opened her massive binder. What followed was one of the most ridiculous displays of evidence seen. The first page was a blurry photo of my house, taken at night from behind a bush. This shows suspicious activity, she announced. The inspector blinked. It shows a house. Look closer, she insisted. He leaned in. Ma'am, that's a porch light. She huffed dramatically and flipped to the next page. A picture of my backyard during my birthday barbecue. Illegal gatherings, she said. That's a birthday party, I said, with store-bought cupcakes. I said, all with store-bought cupcakes. The inspector nodded. Looks like a normal gathering. Karen's eye twitched. It was too loud. It ended at 8 p.m. I reminded her. She flipped another page, and another, and another, each more ridiculous than the last. A picture of my dog chewing a stick, improper waste management. A picture of me carrying boxes, suspicious inventory. A picture of my cousin visiting, unauthorized labor. The inspector looked at her like she needed a wellness check. Finally, he closed the binder gently. Ma'am, none of this is evidence of wrongdoing. Karen's mouth dropped open. Are you saying I'm lying, saying none of this is relevant to the inspection? She turned red, then purple. I could practically see steam rising from her ears. This man is jeopardizing the community, she shrieked. He's manipulating you. He's dangerous. Oh. The inspector gave her a long, exhausted stare. Ma'am, if you don't leave the premises, I will have to call law enforcement for interference in an official investigation. That did it. She froze, not because she was scared, because she was insulted. You'd call the police on me? Hey, yeah. Karen clenched her fists, trembling with pure rage, then stormed out, nearly ripping the door off the hinges. This isn't over, she screamed before peeling out of the driveway like a teenager with a suspended license. The inspector rubbed his forehead. I'm So sorry, he said. She's been harassing this office for months. I know, I replied. She does this to everyone. He finished the inspection, and after reviewing everything twice, he looked at me and said, well, everything here is completely compliant. You're good. Relief flooded through me. Thanks, I said. He scribbled his signature on the final form. I'll file the report today. Officially, you're cleared of all complaints. I thanked him again and walked him to the door. But just as he stepped outside, he paused. By the way, he said quietly, I overheard her outside on the phone earlier. Who? I asked. Sounded like a lawyer. My stomach tightened. The inspector gave me a sympathetic look. She's definitely not done. And with that, he left. The house was quiet again. Too quiet. Karen had failed today. But failure never stopped her. If anything, it fueled her. And whatever she was planning next, I could feel it already. It would be her biggest move yet, her most unhinged, her most desperate, and I had no idea how far she'd go this time. The days following the inspection felt deceptively calm. The kind of silence that settles before a storm finally reveals its true shape. I could sense something brewing long before it arrived, an uneasy tension woven into the air every time I stepped outside. Neighbors whispered more, glanced in Karen's direction more, avoided confrontation more. She had gone unusually quiet since her meltdown during the inspection, and for someone like her, silence was never a sign of surrender. It was a sign of escalation. I knew she was planning something, and I wasn't wrong. It began early one morning, just as the sun was creeping over the rooftops. I walked out to grab a package from my porch when I saw them. Bright red signs staked into the ground in front of almost every house. Large, dramatic, alarming signs claiming a community at risk, unlicensed business and neighborhood, a safety violation alert, and other baseless warnings designed to create panic. At the bottom of each sign was the same printed line, authorized by the HOA Safety Committee. Karen had created a committee of one. Herself. People woke up confused, irritated, and in some cases genuinely nervous. I watched from the window as neighbors gathered in small groups staring at the signs, looking from house to house as if the community had suddenly become a crime zone. Karen stood proudly in the middle of the street holding a clipboard thicker than ever, whispering ominous things to whoever would listen. She was painting the narrative she had been building for months. That I was a threat, that my truck was a threat, that my business was some sinister operation hidden behind ordinary walls. It didn't take long before the text began pouring in. Some were supportive, mocking the signs with sarcastic comments. Others were concerned and confused. A few asked if something serious was happening. I responded calmly to everyone, clarifying that the inspection had cleared me completely and the signs were nothing but Karen's theatrics. But the real chaos erupted when Karen announced an emergency HOA meeting, one she claimed was mandatory for a public safety. Even though she was no longer president, she used her remaining influence and a flair for drama to pressure people into attending. By evening, the clubhouse was filled almost entirely with residents. I stood near the back, arms crossed, watching as Karen positioned herself front and center with her binder, her stack of exaggerated reports, and an expression of righteous fury. The buzz of anxious voices filled the room until she raised her hands dramatically, commanding attention like a general preparing for battle. She launched into a long, winding speech about community integrity, negligence, and dangerous rule violations, giving the impression that she had uncovered a major criminal enterprise rather than losing a petty power struggle. She waved photos, maps, incident logs, most fabricated, some exaggerated, all utterly ridiculous. She claimed that the inspector omissed critical evidence and suggested that I had bribed county officials. The accusations grew more unhinged by the minute, her voice rising with each sentence, her gestures becoming wilder, her desperation leaking through every word. The room shifted from confused to uncomfortable. People exchanged wary glances. Some muttered under their breath, others rolled their eyes, and yet Karen pushed harder, pacing like a prosecutor ready to deliver the final blow. Finally, she demanded a community vote to impose new restrictions that would effectively ban work vehicles, home-based businesses, and any property modifications that weren't explicitly pre-approved by the board. It was a direct attack on me and on several other residents. That was her mistake. The room erupted not with agreement, but with outrage. People who had stayed silent for months finally snapped. One neighbor stood up and reminded everyone that his elderly father ran a small repair service from his garage. Another said her husband's work van was essential for their livelihood. Someone else pointed out that arbitrary fines and harassment were already out of control. The murmurs grew into loud objections, then sharp criticisms, and finally a full-blown pushback against Karen's reign of fear. But Karen wasn't backing down. Okay. She slammed her binder onto the table and declared that the community was too ignorant to protect itself. That was the final straw. The current HOA president, quiet, calm, nothing like Karen, stood up and confronted her. He revealed that Karen had been filing unauthorized paperwork, issuing unapproved warnings, and misusing NHOA resources to fuel her personal vendetta. He announced that the board had formally removed her from all committees and would be voting on banning her from participating in HOA leadership entirely. The room broke into shocked whispers as Karen's face turned pale, then red, then an alarming shade of fury. She tried to argue, but this time, no one came to her defense. She tried to claim corruption, bias, favoritism, anything that could shift the blame, but it was too late. Her months of bullying had finally caught up with her. When the vote was cast, the decision was unanimous. Karen was barred from all HOA involvement for a minimum of 5 years. That was all it took. Her mask cracked. Tears, angry, humiliated, furious tears, formed as she grabbed her binder and stormed out of the clubhouse, leaving residents stunned but relieved. I walked home afterward with a strange sense of finality settling over me. For the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe without watching my back. But deep down, I knew something else too. People like Karen didn't accept defeat. They didn't surrender. They didn't disappear quietly. They regrouped. They retaliated. And as I approached my driveway, I noticed a small envelope taped to my door. Neat handwriting, my name written in red ink. I pulled it off slowly. I opened it. And inside was a single sentence, underlined twice. You haven't won anything. Whatever she had planned next, it was already in motion. The envelope in my hand felt heavier than paper should, as if the words inside carried a weight far beyond ink and threats. I stood in the doorway for a long moment, staring at the message. You haven't won anything, and felt the sharp reminder that Karen was not someone who retreated quietly. Even stripped of HOA power, she still believed she owned the neighborhood, still believed she could twist its residents into pawns in her ongoing crusade. And though the AAAA meeting had been a massive blow to her ego, it had clearly not extinguished her determination. What I didn't know then was how far she was willing to go. Over the next 2 days, subtle chaos unfolded with a precision that made it obvious Karen had planned her next move long before losing her authority. I woke to find anonymous complaints filed directly to the county office. New ones, this time accusing me of storing hazardous materials at home. That same afternoon, a delivery truck blocked my driveway, confused by an order I had supposedly placed. Then there were the flyers. Hundreds of them left on porches and mailboxes warning residents about dangerous chemicals and unreported explosions coming from my property. All nonsense, all fear-mongering, all very much in line with Karen's brand of hysteria. Neighbors began approaching me with hesitant questions, not because they believed the lies, but because they were exhausted by the drama that never seemed to end. I reassured them calmly, showing them copies of the inspector's report, the clearance forms, and the official HOA notices confirming Karen's removal. Most were relieved, some apologized. A few shook their heads and muttered that Karen had finally gone off the deep end. Still, the tension lingered. And by the third day, it was clear this wasn't just petty sabotage, it was a coordinated campaign meant to overwhelm me, isolate me, and force me into submission. The turning point came that evening, just as the sun was sinking and the neighborhood was bathed in warm orange light. I checked my security cameras out of habit and saw movement near the community entrance. At first, I assumed it was someone taking a walk, but then I recognized the posture, the stiff, fast-paced walk that radiated frustration. Karen. She was standing right in front of the welcome sign, pacing in circles like a cornered animal. In her hands was a stack of papers and a giant red marker. I watched as she began scribbling on one of the community bulletin boards, posting a flyer so aggressively the tape tore under her fingers. Curious and more than a little concerned, I headed out, keeping enough distance so she wouldn't notice me immediately. When I got close enough to see the board, I froze. She had posted a massive sheet of paper claiming that the entire HOA board was corrupt, that I had bribed them, that she was the rightful president, and that the neighborhood was under imminent danger if people didn't take action. It was her final meltdown in writing, visible to every passing driver, and then, as if possessed by her own desperation, she began stapling copies onto the wooden posts nearby. That's when she finally noticed me approaching. For a moment, she just stared, eyes wild, hair disheveled, clothes wrinkled like she hadn't slept. There was no HOA title protecting her now, no authority to point to, no clipboard shield to hide behind. She had nothing left but rage. She shouted things I couldn't fully hear at first. Accusations, demands, frantic claims about conspiracies and sabotage, her voice echoing across the quiet street. And for the first time in all of this, I didn't feel angry. I felt pity. Because in that moment, it was painfully clear that her obsession had consumed her far beyond anything that made sense, and she knew it. She oscillated between yelling and trembling, between blaming me and begging for the HOA to reinstate her. She claimed I had turned the neighborhood against her, ruined her reputation, destroyed her life. She said she had sacrificed everything to protect the community. But the truth was simpler. She had sacrificed everything to preserve her own control. As she spiraled, several neighbors began gathering nearby, watching with concern. The current HOA president approached cautiously, speaking softly, trying to de-escalate the situation. A few others stepped forward, calm but firm, telling her to stop, telling her she needed to rest, telling her she couldn't keep doing this to herself or anyone else. And for the first time in all the chaos she had caused, Karen's face shifted from rage to something more fragile, panic. She looked around and saw not supporters, not followers, not intimidated residents, but people who finally saw her behavior for what it was. The power she clung to was gone. The control she fought for was gone. The audience she had always relied on no longer believed her. And slowly, painfully, she realized it. When she finally stopped screaming, the street fell silent except for the soft rustle of wind moving through the trees. The HOA president gently removed the flyer from her hand and told her she needed to step away for a while. No more committees, no more meetings, no more involvement until she addressed the stress and anger consuming her. A few residents offered to walk her home. She resisted at first, then, exhausted, let them escort her away, her steps unsteady and her binder clutched loosely against her chest. As she disappeared around the corner, the neighborhood felt lighter, as if a tension that had hovered for months had finally released. In the following days, the mess was cleaned up, the signs removed, the flyers discarded. The community slowly reset, relieved to have peace again. I parked my truck in the driveway with full approval. I ran my business without fear. I lived without constant surveillance and harassment. And the irony was that the HOA, once a tool Karen used against me, now protected me from her. Months passed, and the neighborhood settled into a steady rhythm. No more threats, no more complaints, no more battles. I eventually heard that Karen had moved away to live with relatives after the HOA formally banned her from all involvement indefinitely. Some felt sorry for her. Some didn't. I just hope she found something healthier to focus on than controlling an entire neighborhood. As for me, I gained something I didn't expect, a community that finally stood together not because of rules, but because they had seen what happens when one person tries to rule through fear. And strangely enough, the battle that began with a fight over where I parked my truck ended up bringing the neighborhood closer than it had ever been. In the end, I didn't need revenge. Karen defeated herself. And the truck she tried so desperately to ban? It still sits proudly in my driveway, visible, legal, and impossible to ignore.